Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm bringing you my TBR for the readathon Polar-A-Thon. Now Polar-A-Thon has been put together by Jade Ray Reads, I believe is the channel, and I'll link it down below as well as her original announcement video. This is the second year it's running, and it's running from the 3rd to the 9th of February, and the loose theme for this readathon is actually polar fantasy. So polar fantasy is a fantasy book that takes place in a polar or arctic setting, as the name does indeed suggest. But you don't have to read many polar fantasies to fit into this readathon. This readathon is just focused on all things wintry and cold, which given in February it's freezing in the UK, that seems very, very fitting. So this round, Jade's done a really lovely map for us, and I, in typical Emma fashion, have come up with a little bullet journal spread for it. So I've got a couple of little cute penguins, and the idea is that you're sort of zigzagging up to try and get to your polar fantasy at the top. So everyone does need to read at least one polar fantasy, but the rest of mine don't fit into that category, I don't think, unless polar sci-fi is a thing, and then I do have at least one of those. So I have a couple of options on a few of the lines, but I'm going to run through like what I'm planning to do on each particular line, and then sort of point out the ones that I think I'm most likely to read. So on the first bottom row, there is a one-day read, a retelling, and a cold word. That should read, not world. And I'm going to go for a retelling. And for that one, I'm going to be reading Jo Nesbø's Macbeth. This was translated from the original Norwegian by Don Bartlett, and I'm actually going to be buddy reading this with Amy from Amy Gets Lit. I'll link her channel down below. This, as the title suggests, is a retelling of Shakespeare's Macbeth, but this time set in a very Scandinavian crime noir setting, and there's drug busts and paranoia and you know, corrupt police, and it all just generally sounds really good fun. It's a chunky one, coming in at over 500 pages, but I think it's going to be relatively fast paced, and Amy reads quite a lot of Jo Nesbø already. Jo Nesbø has a series of crime books with a particular character. I think the main character's name is Harry, so she's a big fan of Jo Nesbø already and speaks quite highly of him, so I'm quite excited about this book in general. So this is a high priority book, most definitely. Then on the next line I have Foiled Cover, A Furry Friend, and Intimidating, and I'm going to attempt to read my intimidating book, which is the only non-fiction on this list, and that is Gulag, A History by Anne Applebaum. This is, like the title suggests, a history of the Gulag in Russia, which is the forgotten Holocaust. It was basically a very terrible time in Russian history where a lot of people got sent off to concentration camps and died in freezing cold situations. So all smiles and cheerful sunshine and rainbows all around with this particular book. It did win the Pulitzer Prize in 2004. Olive from A Book Olive speaks very, very highly of it. However, one of the reasons why it's intimidating is it has about size 10 font. Can you see how tiny that wording is? So, and it is quite a chunker, even though it's got tiny font. So I think this could be a bit more than I can actually feasibly do in a week, but I'm happy to give it a go, and it'll be really exciting to at least start this book, even if I don't get it finished. Then on the next line I actually have two potential options, and I really don't know which one I'm going to go for. I think it depends on how the other books go. So we have Icy Cover, A Journey, and Heartwarming. So for Icy Cover I have The Reader on the 627. This I believe is translated from French. It's by Jean-Paul Didier-Laurent. And is it translated? Translated by Ross Schwartz. So obviously these ones will do really well for ticking off my translated fiction goals. And this is supposed to be a romance, and it's about a gentleman who works in a like pulp factory making books, and he rescues some of the pages of the books. Sorry, the Gulag has just attacked me. Stay. Rescue some of the pages of the books and then reads them out to people on the train, and then when he does so he finds a woman's diary, and it is kind of his attempt to try and connect with her, I believe. It is supposed to be, this would kind of technically fit for Heartwarming as well in some ways, because it is supposed to be a lovely little romance book basically, but this one clocks in quite short at only like 200 odd pages and is much smaller, and just I think is going to be a bit of an easier read, so it might be one to go for after Gulag, which I think is going to be super intense. So this is a potential. Then another potential for a journey is The Ice by Leilani Poole. So this is also a foiled cover. It's absolutely gorgeous, but that doesn't help me because it'll be too far over on the map for me to be able to wriggle up the way I want to. And this is kind of like a climate change fiction, and it's about the polar ice caps have almost completely melted, and there are cruises that go up there to try and find sightings of like polar bears and various arctic animals, of which there are only like 2 or 3 of each species left. But in one of the expeditions up there, they find a dead body frozen in the ice, that is one of the gentlemen who I think was a climate change activist, and there's a bit of like a political intrigue thing going on there, kind of a political climate thriller. Sounds really interesting. I love Leilani Poole's The Bees. Absolutely adored it. One of my favourite books of 2018. One of my all-time favourite books. That is an incredible book. So I'm hopeful that this one will be interesting and exciting, but it's been sitting on my shelf for way too long. But it is, because it's a hardback, it's a little bit bigger, so it just might become like, can I feasibly do this in a week? Then we have the next line. So we have Northern Folklore, A Snowy Setting, and Icy Magic. And again, I have 2 options for this line. I'm completely ignoring this line over here. I'm not doing anything in these, in all this side of the map. So for Northern Folklore, I have Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. This is supposed to be based on Russian folklore. It's the one of 2 Russian folklore books I have on this list, and I guess this would technically count as a polar fantasy because there is dark magic and it's set in Russia. This is Russia in the 20th century, and there is something to do with, you know, I'm not even too sure. I really don't know. But yes, 20th century Russia meets Russian folklore. I've heard very good things about it, and it is on my 5-star predictions list, so I do need to get around to it at some point quite soon. And again, this one clocks in only at like kind of 300 odd pages, so these might be quite nice ones for interspersing with the bigger books. One that I would be astounded if I don't get to it, even if I don't do some of the other paths and if it isn't kind of relevant, is At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. This is a terrifying novella where an expedition to the Antarctic goes wrong and there's something in the ice. H.P. Lovecraft is one of the like OG classic original horror writers out there, and he is indeed on my Classics TBR for 2020, this book in particular. It's super short, so obviously I think it would be absurd if I didn't get to it. It might even count for one day read. That was like one of the bottom ones. Not that would massively help me because I'm definitely going to read Macbeth anyway, but it's one that I'm super keen for, so I'm very excited that I have a readathon that this fits nicely into. And then the final book that I have to get to complete the readathon, because it is indeed the polar fantasy on my list that fits in the very top slot, is The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. I've lost track of how many flipping TBRs this book has ended up on because I just keep putting it off. Not because I don't think I'm going to enjoy it, in fact the exact opposite. I think I'm really going to enjoy it, which means that I keep like putting it off for a rainy day, and a day when I really want like a definite good read, and like maybe I don't want to, once I finish the trilogy it will be over and I won't have any more, so I need to keep saving it. And it just means I've had this book on my shelf for a year. I bought it in hardback because I was so excited that it came out, and I've just been ignoring it, so I really need to prioritise this book. For those of you who don't know, Catherine Arden, this is the book 3 of the Winter Night trilogy, which is a Russian folklore polar fantasy set in kind of medieval Russia. So it's nice, I've got 2 Russian folklores but at very different time periods, and it follows our main character Vasya, who can the demons of Russian folklore, and it's kind of the very origins of folklore clashing with sort of Christianity and some of the more organised religions, and then there's a whole bunch of history things over the top. Obviously it's book 3, so I don't want to say a crazy amount more than that, but book 1 is The Bear and the Nightingale, one of my all-time favourite books as well. Absolutely amazing story, and I really enjoyed book 2 as well, so definitely go check those out, especially if you're planning on taking part in Polar-A-Thon. Absolute perfect books for this kind of a readathon, so I have to read this book in this week, or at least in February, else I'll be so grumpy at myself. So that is it from me for my readathon TBR. I'm going to link everything down below. Jade's got a really lovely bunch of recommendations videos for if you're new to the polar fantasy genre and want to get some recommendations of what to read. I've not watched them yet, but I want to go back and watch them, I think after this readathon, so I don't get distracted off my own TBR by the introduction of even more new and exciting books. What do you think to my TBR? Is there anything in it that you think is going to be especially exciting and interesting? And that's pretty much it from me. Obviously I'm going to be releasing a February TBR as well, because this is only for the first real week of February, so do keep an eye out for that, where I probably won't mention any of these books in any real detail, but I'm going to mention some of the other stuff that I've got going on in February, because I do have another buddy read as well as a few other things that I really want to prioritise on my shelves. So yeah, have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!